Let's talk about the Sumerian copula. The copula is a grammatical marker that links the subject of a sentence to a description, an identity, or a state of being. In English, this is represented by the verb to be, so it would appear in sentences like, I am the king, you are mighty, or it is the lick of death. There are several forms and nuances of the copula, but the most common by far is the enclitic, which will attach directly to the predicate noun or noun phrase, depending on context and or emphasis. Yes, that's right, it can be used to form emphasis. The copula has many nuances, but let's just look at the simple paradigm. So let's keep it nice and simple. I am the king. But even this simple phrase we can see expressed in several ways. All three of these ultimately say I am the king, but you could translate them in slightly different ways if you like. Maybe you say I am indeed the king indeed I am, and I am the king. But ultimately the semantics are the same, right? However, context and or emphasis dictates where we might see the enclitic. Lugal anubda lamubamen. I am the king of the four corners. We see it at the end of the predicate noun phrase here because king is the head noun and is being modified by the receiving noun. However, if we look at a slightly different construction, here the copula is attached directly to the predicate noun rather than the modifier, and it's adding emphasis. What it's saying is, I am Shogi, the mighty man, their leader. Or to be more specific, considering we have the terminative / adverbiative on the end, for I am indeed Shogi, the mighty king, the foremost among them. But that is moving away from the topic of the video, so we're not going to go into that. Anyway, so the second person enclitic copula is marked in the exact same manner as the first person. So in some instances, this can be quite confusing and we would have to rely entirely on context. However, there are some nuances which help us out. As with the first person, this can be laid out in a similar manner with the independent pronoun, the second person independent pronoun, helping us out a little bit, or we use the standard form and have to rely entirely on context, which can prove tricky. For instance, if we look at this proverb, Shagnya luulumen, Iginya lunumen. So this could be, in my heart you are human, but in my eyes you are not a man. Or because the first and second person are the same, maybe it's saying, in my heart I am human, in my eyes I am not a man. And maybe it's saying that, but if we take into consideration the context, I think it makes more sense that it is the second person. Because when you say in my eyes, you're really projecting outwards, right? So second person makes sense. Just a quick note before we go on. This on the end, numen. This is not what we're talking about in this video. This is not an enclitic copula. This is the independent copula, and I will make a separate video about that at another time. So what about this then? Dubsa antamen, Lukita numen. Well, this is one of those tricky ones. So the copula here, either the independent or the enclitic here, could really be translated with the first person or the second person, because there's no other context to tell us otherwise. This is officially translated in the second person, but only because it resides in a collection of proverbs where many of the proverbs are in the second person. So this has been translated in the second person purely because of that. Let's do one more example of the second person attached directly to the predicate noun, with a clear example of the context telling us the person. So, dubsamen, I am or you are a scribe. However, we know without a doubt that this is the second person because of the next construction, which says mu ni za, which is mu, name, combined with a reflexive expression, ni meaning self, and za is a compound of the second person possessive marker zu. This is actually what's informing us that the entire phrase is in the second person, and it's combined with a, which could be the genitive or the locative because they have identical phonemes. However, I think the genitive fits here perfectly. So it's saying the name of yourself, and then on the end we have the negation marker attached to the verbal base to know. So it's basically saying the name of yourself is not known. So a full idiomatic translation, it's saying something like, you are a scribe, but you don't even know your own name, is what it's saying. And finally, the third person singular copula. Now this is a little easier to distinguish because it takes a different form. Depending on what precedes it, we will either see it as am, or the a of am may assimilate to a preceding vowel. There are also a few cases where we would see a consonant-vowel-consonant arrangement, depending on what consonant precedes it. D, K, L, or N, and these are often the re-emergence of dropped auslaus. Let's check out a couple of examples. Orkun mitukuam. He is a dog without a tail. So the third person copula there obviously corresponds to he is. A similar English term would be a shadow of his former self or a bird without wings. Okay, let's give an example with an assimilated vowel. Ennatilla gulinim. As long as he is alive, he is a friend. Now this might cause a bit of confusion because the nominalizing suffix here gives a translation similar to the enclitic copula because it's changing the verb to live into a noun. And so the best way to translate that in English is alive. But here is the copula with the assimilated A. And finally, I will just give you one example of the consonant-vowel-consonant arrangement quickly. Because the genitive ends in a K and the copula is attached to the genitive, we'll use cam here rather than am3. So it says, it is the seed of Enki. And that's that. That took me damn near 15 hours to edit that, I think. Anyway, if you like Sumerian, give us a follow on TikTok, House of the Tablet.